Good afternoon and good morning. This is Mark Johnson from Loyalty 360, welcoming you to our ongoing Thought Leadership in Loyalty series. I wanted to thank you all for attending today's webinar, Brand Loyalty is the Outcome, Not Just the Program, presented by Scott Robinson and Sean Clayson of Bond Brand Loyalty, previously known as Merit Loyalty Marketing. Today, Scott and Sean will be discussing unique and powerful insights from their 2014 Loyalty Report. I wanted to remind everyone that this is one of the series of webinars powered by Loyalty 360. As always, the recording of this webinar will be archived for Loyalty 360 members to access. If you have any questions, please use the WebEx question function on your control panel, and we will forward the questions to the presenters for the Q&A at the end of the event. And with that, I will hand it over to Scott and Sean.
Good morning, everybody. This is Sean Clayson. I'm VP Creative and Strategy here at Bond Brand Loyalty. And we're really excited to talk to you today about some of the notions that Mark mentioned, and specifically maybe starting off by framing things under this notion of brand loyalty and this combination of the notions behind brand, what makes brands rich and valuable, and how that overlays with loyalty and how those two topics relate. I'm going to call out kind of three different sentiments that you're going to hear us reference in the conversation over the next little while. The first one, sort of typified by that card on the left-hand side, is really about loyalty programs proper and a dialogue that we're going to have about sort of programmatic loyalty. The second sentiment is captured by the icon of the dog, and this is a symbol that we use to sort of think about the sentiment of loyalty, the human sentiment of fidelity and what it means to stay committed. You know, that symbol for us is sort of a shorthand for that. And the last one on the right-hand side is going to be a discussion about brand love and its relationship to loyalty, and where those two intersect and overlap, and the kind of resiliency that can be built into brands with loyalty. And so the last thing I'll leave you before we jump into the content is just to think about, you know, the relationship of loyalty to the brand or business that you represent, and you know, the degree to which that commitment can be strengthened via loyalty proper, via using loyalty throughout your brand, and how it relates to a lot of the other marketing activity that we're all up to. So with that, we're gonna kick things right off here.
Well, and speaking of loyalty, this is Scott Robinson. Speaking of loyalty, we know many of you are likely following World Cup soccer, maybe on dual window on your desktop this afternoon, so we'll try to do our best to keep you apprised of any updates in the Algeria versus Belgium game, and we know we'll be well wrapped up on this webinar before Brazil and Mexico get started a little later this afternoon. So thanks for joining us. We're really excited to share this stuff with you today. Just as we do get underway, Sean and I want to make sure that we tailor our speaking points to the audience that is joining us today. So would love for you to give us a sense for who has joined us today, and tell us a little bit about your organization and the current status for you in terms of programmatic loyalty. Michael, our behind-the-scenes tech assistant, is going to launch a poll just off to the side, and for some of you, maybe on your main screen, just click one of the radio buttons in answer to the question, in terms of loyalty, today your organization is just starting to learn about loyalty. Maybe you're defining requirements or just ready to begin implementation. Maybe for some of you, you've already got programs in market. Some of you may be recent launches. There's been a number of those this year. And others joining us may be more tenured or legacy types of initiatives. And we know that some of you are certainly just joining to keep apprised of what others are saying about this topic in the market. So give us a sense, and Sean and I will tailor our talking points throughout today. The poll will stay open for about a minute on the side, and we'll get underway with the conversation in the meantime. So as Sean teed up, one of the places we look to answer the questions of the day, loyalty, the outcome, not just the program, we look to our current loyalty report for some of the evidence and guidance to answer this question. This is the 4th year that we've conducted this national study. It's a study of about 6,000 consumers who participate in loyalty initiatives by right across the nation. In the 4 years that we've been running this study, we've continued to evolve it. In its first year, we were very careful to make sure we put our finger firmly on the pulse of things that matter to many of you. How many programs are participants enrolled in today? To what extent are loyalty initiatives influencing attitudes and behaviors? And as I mentioned, we like to continue to evolve the content of the study to make sure it remains relevant to marketers and those designing and operating programs. In its 2nd and 3rd year, we added topics like privacy. We know consumers today are concerned about the ways in which marketers are using their personal information, so we wanted to get a sense for how comfortable consumers are with marketers achieving personalization through the use of personal info. We know that things like that mobile and social are front and center on the minds of marketers today, so again, topics we added each year we evolved the study. We also cast the net a little wider this year in terms of the brands we invited to participate in the study that wouldn't necessarily show up, at least in its traditional sense, as rewards programs. Brands like Nike and Adidas and others that you might not think are operating loyalty initiatives and yet have lots in the market and at play that influences consumer loyalty. The main topics that we want to cover in today's conversation, certainly we've included lots in the study, but the main topics are these 3 things. We want to give you a sense, just the tips of the ways for consumer attitudes and the extent to which programs today are influencing behavior, and then spend the lion's share of our time on the 2 topics, brand alignment and brand loyalty. Brand alignment, we wanted to understand to what extent programs, when they embody the attributes of the brand, drive things like participant satisfaction and advocacy. And brand loyalty, we wanted to answer the question, are consumers more loyal to the discount or to the points or to the rebates, that is the program, or are they loyal to the brand? So we wanted to explore those as key topics for today, and they're some of the new topics we added to this year's study. Okay, that said, moving on to just invite you to participate online. Here we are on Twitter at Create a Bond, and if you'd like to hashtag out to your networks anything that catches your attention today, hashtag loyalty report would be a great way to do that. A few tips of the waves, just to sort of set context for the market today. On average, participants in programs are enrolled in a little under 11 programs. Interestingly, they're only active in a portion of those, or just under 8. So consumers are telling us that they have more appetite for adding more and more programs to their proverbial loyalty wallet. In fact, that 10.9 went up about 20% since the study last year. But there is only a limited number of brands in which consumers can engage or to be actively participating. Interestingly, what lives behind a couple of these numbers are a couple other things. Affluent segments tend to be over-indexed for enrollment. Millennials, interestingly, an important segment on the minds of marketers today, they tend not to be any more or any less active in programs, and yet what we did see in the study is the extent to which millennials are influenced by programs. A couple things that marketers will be pleased to hear, the extent to which programs influence the what, where, and when consumers buy. About 64% said this year, I modify when and where I buy the things that I buy in order to maximize my benefits through the programs in which I participate. And that number is up significantly from last year, as is the extent to which consumers change the brands that they buy.
Yeah, that stat on the right-hand side, maybe a human way to think about that is basically half. Every other person you may walk by in a mall or on a shopping district street is changing directions to go and shop at a place where they can maximize the loyalty program benefits that are afforded to them on a brand-by-brand basis. And so it starts to get very real and very material when you think about that stat in those terms.
Marketers will also want to know the extent to which participants in the programs they're operating are engaging more, are spending more after having enrolled than before. Interestingly, only about 40% say, I spend more now that I'm a member in this program than I did before. So good news among a portion of customers, and yet the other side of the same number is that 61% of customers actually say, I haven't really changed my purchase behavior. When we look at this on a category by category basis, this sort of bookended by retail at the bottom, the fewest percent or the fewest number of customers say, I spend more now than I did before. And in the co-brand payment card sense on the other end, that category ranks highest among those spending more. I think there's probably a bit of a tender consolidation that exists on the co-brand side, but retail should take note, given how many retail brands have initiatives in place, retail should certainly take note that only about a third of customers saying, I spend more now than I did before. Now, programs aren't only inviting customers to spend more. Programs are also inviting customers to engage in non-purchase activities like product recommendations, like writing product reviews, like advocating for products to others. So there are other things that marketers are hoping their programs will deliver that go beyond just the purchase, but certainly purchase is top of mind. Here's another interesting finding in terms of the extent to which programs influence a customer's decision to purchase with brands. When we evaluated all of the different things that consumers take into account when making a purchase decision, one of the things we uncovered was that a program is as important as the location of the store.
It's funny, Scott, I know that when you and I talk about the role that loyalty programs play in the overall marketing mix, I think in the beginning, just having a loyalty program was a differentiator. And so now, as we see the world get more complex and more crowded with loyalty initiatives of many forms, we're still wondering to what degree is it a competitive differentiator. And so this particular stat about how it relates to something like location was especially compelling.
Agreed. And here's the data that enabled us to make this point. When we evaluate things like product and price, we know these things rank high on the list of important factors influencing a decision. Other things like communications, albeit important, a little further down the list, but location and program ranking very similar in weight among consumers today.
So as a marketer, I mean, thinking about the cost and investment required to, say, open new locations, to literally expand the network of locations where people can find your brand or your products, et cetera, those are costly endeavors. And to see that loyalty, explicitly loyalty programs, ranks just as important, I think is encouraging to know that this is a much more affordable differentiator for people that can drive consumer behavior.
And by the way, these factors weight very differently on a category-by-category basis. What shows up in retail tends to look very different than, say, in hospitality loyalty
Sure.
or in payment card loyalty.
Yeah.
A couple other great points to affirm to marketers that consumers are saying positive things about programs and loyalty initiatives. About 80% of consumers say, the things that marketers and programs are asking of me as a participant to enroll, to share a little bit about who I am as a consumer, to raise my hand each time I make a purchase or serve up a product review. The things that marketers are asking of me as a participant are worth the effort. And good news as well from a retention perspective, almost 3/4 of consumers say, yep, the program has me more likely to continue doing business with a brand or with a company. As we teed up at the beginning of our remarks today, privacy is on the minds of consumers, and so too it's on the minds of marketers. When we evaluated how concerned consumers are about the topic privacy in general. This number has gone up on a year-over-year basis. But when we look at some of the other factors consumers consider or that are the barriers to them participating in the initiatives served up by brands, privacy ranks number 2, only second to fees. Fees tends to rank very highly in this study on a year-over-year basis and in the work we do for specific brands and clients. So we weren't surprised necessarily to see fees there, but with privacy sneaking in as a strong number 2, it is on the minds of consumers today.
The second part of this, everything to the right of privacy, I mean, we've kind of chuckled about some of the things that show up here, like privacy would be a bigger barrier than whether I shop that brand enough, whether that brand even gives me a good or poor experience. The fact that I even like that brand is less of a factor than the privacy concerns I have about joining the program. I think that's fairly pronounced.
Certainly a topic, mobile, again, on the minds of marketers today. Sean, quick tee up for some of the insights on mobile.
Yeah, so I mean, we probably could have spent 4 webinars worth of time just talking about the rich topic that is mobile. Even that word kind of gets conjugated to be 150 different vocabularies of mobile. Here's probably the main takeaway, and we would love to dive deeper, and you'll probably see a supplement from us over the next little while, just diving deep into this topic. But there's a lot of noise in the market about mobile, and I would say the study bears witness to the fact that people have an appetite to the tune of 72% to engage and interact with brands via their mobile devices. But what's interesting is when you start breaking it down into the individual things, 1 through 5, the top 5 things listed here first, there's far less of an appetite when we start getting specific with people about what it is that would appeal to them in a mobile capacity. And so, you know, the appetite that's there when we're talking generalities, yeah, I'd like to interact with a brand or a program via mobile, dissipates significantly when we name the usual suspects. Can you manage the rewards? Is there a redemption option? Can I pay at the purchase or checkout? All of those things are significantly less attractive and less appealing to respondents. And I think that's a bit of a call out for us as marketers, loyalty marketers, marketers in general, to say, you know, I have Henry Ford in mind. If you asked people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse. Until we imagine experiences that are more personalized, that are more customized, that are more compelling than just these top 5 things, I think we're going to continue to see this gap between, and maybe even see less and less appetite until we live up to that expectation, until we live up to that appetite.
Yeah, and I think the implication for marketers on this topic is, given that consumers don't quite know what they want yet, but they will once they see it or experience it, the implication for marketers is innovate and implement quickly, fail just as quickly, and move on to the next potential application or feature for a specific customer group. Yeah,
a lot of the clients that we work with sort of echo and mirror that sentiment. They're looking to try some things out to see how it goes, learn from those things quickly, and continue to evolve.
Last sort of tip of the wave insight from the general attitudes and sentiments part of our conversation, and this really tees up the next part of our discussion. About 80% of customers say, my program experience is part of my experience or part of my relationship with the brand. Traditional thinking, and even probably to some extent still today, some brands, some organizations view loyalty as this thing off to the side that operates in its own silo, separate and apart from what the brand is up to as a brand or the other marketing activities that the brand is undertaking.
Certainly, I mean, news off the top that Mark shared and we've just been new into market with is our name change. And part of that is signaled by a recognition of something like this, that gone are the days where the program is sort of off to the side, but it is now a core strategy for a brand. We believe that. We know the power that this kind of insight can bring to the whole business. And so we believe it so much, in fact, we've kind of made it our namesake.
There is lots more on these tips of the wave topics in a white paper that you can download on our site. We'll give you a link to that later in our conversation. But wanted to switch gears off that note onto the second of our three topics today, which is brand alignment. Given how highly participants view the program experience as part of their brand experience, we wanted to explore the topic of brand alignment. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, when we go through the activities involved in designing, we're really trying to relate the program components, the way the program comes to life, the benefits it offers back, the experience that it enables, to the attributes that the brand purports to represent, making sure that there is very much fidelity to the way that you think of that sort of mother brand and the way that you experience the program itself.
So with that quick explanation of brand alignment, give us a sense for, think of, and for those of you operating more than one program, many issuers today tend to operate a specific program, say on a payment card. If that's the case, think of one of the programs that you as an organization operate. To what extent do you feel that your initiative is aligned with the brand proper? Do you strongly agree that it is, or do you strongly disagree that it is? So we'll serve up a poll in the sidebar and give us a sense for to what extent your program is brand aligned. And we'll leave that poll open for a minute, and we'll come back to and share the answers out with everyone.
So as we do that work, I think we wanted to pose the question to ourselves, to what extent does brand alignment drive the kind of customer engagement that we're all seeking with loyalty? You know, 57% of members would say that their experience with the program is consistent with that of the brand, that is their expectations. Generally, this is kind of on an aggregate level, that there's follow-through between what they expect out of the brand and what they experience in the program. It starts to get interesting when we look at sort of agreement and disagreement by people who are satisfied.
Yeah, so with respect to the statement, the program experience is consistent with my experience with the overall brand. When we look among members in programs that they deem brand aligned, and conversely among members in programs that they deem not brand aligned, there is significant differences in the extent to which participants are satisfied. In non-brand aligned programs, only about a third of participants are satisfied with their program experience. In programs where the program is aligned with the brand proper, over 3 times higher satisfaction among members among that cohort. So already the start of some evidence to say brand alignment is paying dividends on the satisfaction front. And we're going to come back in a minute to share a couple other ways to look at the dividends this pays for brands. But in the meantime, let's take a quick look at this on a category-by-category basis. As we teed up earlier, about 57% say the programs that I'm participating in are brand aligned or is brand aligned. On a category-by-category basis, things rank most highly for co-brand credit cards and for QSR programs, and least high for telecommunications programs and retail programs. Let's just tee back up before we get into some specific examples. If we could just share the poll results back out with the audience.
So looks like half of people don't want to answer that question. And then kind of an equal split between some and somewhat agree and neutral about whether their programs do, in fact, align to the brand experience, align to the brand expectation.
Yeah, that dovetails with what, that dovetails with the what consumers are telling us. And so it seems like this audience or marketers operating programs would also describe, on average, their programs as consumers would. Those that answered the poll question here today, looks like it nets out on an average of about half, and 57 in our study. Let's look at a couple examples. When we look within, and we surveyed, by the way, and we have program level results on over 170 programs in market. When we look at this attribute, brand alignment, here are the names of the brands that top out the list for participants deeming the program experience as brand aligned.
So we'll call out a couple of examples here on the left-hand side. I mean, Nike is probably one that wouldn't necessarily strike everyone as being a loyalty program. What they've been doing with Fuel Band, with Plus, what they will continue to do under Apple's kind of colonization of what's going on in that peripheral world. All the markers of loyalty are present in a program like what Nike has been operating. There is a unique identifier. There is regular personalized communication. There is participation in a branded sort of community of runners or soccer players or all the different incarnations that they put into market in the last couple of years. So not surprising to me that Nike would show up there. More explicitly, you know, the Starbucks example, I think is a good one for us as marketers in understanding the relationship between brand, the program, and keeping brand alignment. You know, the Starbucks app, we sit with a lot of clients who ask us in particular, you know, what do I do about mobile when it comes to my loyalty program? Do I issue a separate app? I've already got a brand app out there. A lot of the times I find that brand app's main functionality is like a store locator, which I think is a good feature of another app. I'm not sure it's an app on its own. Starbucks has woven the experience of the rewards program right into the experience with its brand. You can pay every day, 5 times a day, if you're one of those kinds of customers, for your coffee with your app. You can see the stars accumulating. You can understand sort of what those benefits are, and I think that's a good cue for us. They've woven it together so tightly that it's hard to distinguish sort of which part of that experience is just the program versus me experiencing the brand itself. So I think there's good lessons there for us as marketers.
Sean, as we tee up the other end of the same conversation, we see brands like Pepsi, for example, making the list of least brand aligned. What are some of the attributes that you might describe the Pepsi brand embodies?
You know, like you would expect, young, youthfulness, carefree, joy, fun, some of those things that Pepsi has worked hard to try and carve out for itself in its own category.
Yeah, and when we see some of the programmatic benefits that Pepsi is serving up to its participants, doesn't necessarily feel, I mean, it's easy to see why some of these, why members wouldn't say, yeah, it's not brand aligned.
If I blinded the top of that and said, yeah, you can get lawn chairs and you can get some jerseys and some cameras and other electronics, I mean, it might be like any airline catalog, any bank or FI catalog, and I think, you know, the consumers in this study would agree there's not as much brand alignment there as there probably could be.
And Charter there, sort of at the bottom of the list, we've come to learn that they would source some merchandise and make that available to its telecommunications subscribers, and so that there again doesn't necessarily feel brand aligned.
Yeah.
And maybe the folks at Charter sort of had early eyes on our study because they had announced I think about a week and a half ago that they were starting to make some significant changes to their program. So we'll watch with interest as Charter relaunches and with fingers crossed, hopefully a little more brand aligned.
Yeah, a branded T-shirt with my telecommunications provider on it doesn't feel like a brand aligned benefit that I expect just because it has the logo.
Agreed. When we were serving up earlier some of the results around customer satisfaction or member satisfaction, we also meant that word to be synonymous with things like advocacy and propensity to stay with brands. In our study, our analysis proved true, and we as marketers see this elsewhere. Satisfaction tends to correlate very highly with things like advocacy and things like retention with brands. Beyond simply satisfaction, brand-aligned programs pay even more significant dividends on the customer's likelihood to recommend. In fact, 6 times higher likelihood to recommend among members in brand-aligned programs, and even higher among the extent to which members in brand-aligned programs will stay with brands. So if satisfaction weren't positive enough for marketers to take note of brand alignment, certainly advocacy and retention sort of tell the strongest part of the story.
Yeah, those things start to get pretty material down at the bottom line. So as we were looking at this study overall, making sure that we were going to understand the differences between the loyalty to a program alone versus loyalty to the brand with the program, you know, SAT could be seen as myopic, my satisfaction with that program in particular. But when you start to see that it's the great predictor for likelihood to recommend and the marketing efficiency that lives in that kind of advocacy, plus propensity to come back and shop again, I think that's really, really material on a P&L.
Sean, we've talked a lot about in our thinking lines up to the observation and what's been well published that marketers are spending significantly more on acquisition than on retention, and yet it's far more cost effective to keep a customer than to go get a new one. This evidence really lines up to support some of that thinking.
Yeah, you know, there's maybe a marketing schizophrenia there where we know these things. We know that 20% of our customers account for 80% of our revenues. We know it's more profitable to keep a customer than go get a new one, and yet we're grossly and drastically overspent, upside down in the kind of spend that goes into acquisition, which is talking to strangers and, as Joseph Jaffe would say, others who are willing to leap for a dime or leap for a discount and switch, which is kind of the, I would say, a disloyalty factor.
So here's what we hope you heard us say during this part of our discussion today on brand alignment, that brand aligned programs drive significant dividends in terms of customer sat, in terms of advocacy, and in terms of retention. And the added benefit is that brand aligned programs are a sustainably differentiated approach to engaging customers. Less easy to mimic than, say, a bigger, better discount by a participant. When programs are brand aligned, your competitors will have a much more difficult time launching a competitive, compelling offer.
So when the market for loyalty was still sort of nascent, it was fine to just have a program. And if you weren't first in, it was fine to just kind of have a Me Too program. Now, today, with the world as complex and crowded as it is, it's all that much more important to make sure that your program is about your brand, is lined up to what your brand stands for, and that won't be easily mimicable. So it'll remain a competitive differentiator the way programs were intended to do in the first place.
Great and intended segue into the topic, brand loyalty. Let us just sort of change gears from the perspective of the rational things we've been talking about in and around things like SAT, advocacy, and propensity to stay with brands. And we're going to talk a little bit about, in this part of the conversation, some of the more emotive side of loyalty, things like love for the brand, things like customers feeling delighted with their brand experiences, brands making their customers feel recognized and special, a sense of pride or inspiration that some customers get when engaging with brands. So not to say that these are purely rational and emotional lists. They certainly overlap and influence one another to a considerable extent. But what we wanted to just make the shift from the more pragmatic, usually more tangible side on the rational elements and start chatting about brand love. But as we teed up earlier, we wanted to answer the question in this part of our study and analysis, to what extent are consumers loyal to the brand or just to the benefits served up to them in programs? Let us just set the context to start. A third of customers, or a little under a third of customers, say, I wouldn't be loyal to the brand if it weren't for this brand's program. Now let's pause on that for a second. If I'm the director of loyalty, I'm thinking, gosh, a third of our business is being brought in because of the work that me and my team are doing.
It's great news.
That's pretty good. If I'm the CMO or the CEO and I'm thinking, gosh, a third of my customers are only loyal to my brand because of the benefits we're serving up in a program, that has potentially cause for concern if the benefits are easily mimicked by my competitors, if my customers are really just loyal to my brand because of a discount or a rebate. What's to stop one of my competitors from launching a bigger, better offer down the road?
Inside their program or otherwise. And I think you soften that when you say, oh my gosh, I have this like holy shit moment if I'm the CMO that says a third of my customers may not even be loyal to my brand. They might only be
just to the discount.
Just to the discount.
What if we look at this on a category by category basis? So we sort of took a macro study view with the 29%. Let's look what this looks like on a category by category view. And these aren't all of them, just sort of the bookends of the values in the study. On the higher end, 40% of participants in co-brand credit card programs would say, I'm not loyal to the brand, whether that's, say, the merchant brand in this case or to the issuer brand, if it weren't for this program. And on the other end, I mean, there's certainly lots more in the consumer consideration set in retail, as we were teeing up before, price and products and location and the in-store experience, the online experience, et cetera. So only a quarter of customers say in retail, I wouldn't be loyal to the brand if it weren't for the program. Let's look now on a specific brand level. So again, we looked at the macro study level, the category by category view. Let's take a couple brand level for instances. And this pattern bore true right across our study. For brands that offer its customers or its program members a payment card component or a co-brand payment card component to the program, as well as a non-payment card component, this pattern bore true. The percent of customers loyal to the brand only because of the program in every case was higher among customers on the payment card component. Look at Marriott, for example. I mean, loyalty in the programmatic sense is well entrenched in the hospitality space. 3/4 of their customers on their Marriott credit card are only loyal to the Marriott brand because of the benefits they're getting on that card.
Yeah, the card, possibly the most transient financial vehicle in the FI industry, and it's the thing to the tune of 3/4 of customers that are keeping people loyal.
Quick update from our World Cup sponsor. Guess the score is now 2-1 Belgium versus Algeria. We took two different approaches to answering the question, are customers loyal to the brand or just to the program? The first approach, we looked at love for the brand and differences in love for the brand in terms of members of programs versus customers of brands, non-members of programs. And then in the second approach, we looked at only members, the extent to which members love the brand versus love the program. Let's take a look at this first of two approaches, and we'll start to reveal some of what we found. Here's a handful of brands that ranked highest in the study for the percent of members in programs that love the brand versus the percent of customers of brands that love the brand. So take Nordstrom, for example. 30% more members love the Nordstrom brand than its non-member customers. That's probably not that surprising. It would be intuitive for us to think that a brand's best customers or most loyal customers or most active customers would more often or more apt to sign up for a brand program. That part isn't necessarily that surprising. It is the context for what was revealed to us is a little bit interesting, a bit peculiar, if you will.
Sure, that some of these brands in the blue on the bottom side of this slide, that more people would have loved the brand who are not members of those brands' programs, sort of challenged the notion that programs hold a brand's best customers. I think we generally walk around with that. I've heard many a client presume that a loyalty program and a best customer program are generally synonymous, and I think that there was something interesting in this set of brands who showed up in kind of the inverse way. Of particular interest was the Amazon brand. I mean, Amazon largely, celebrated to be kind of infallible, a lot of enthusiasm about that brand, a lot of enthusiasm about what that brand offers to people, a lot of equal anxiety in the retail category about how it's changing the business dynamic. But when we look at Amazon versus Amazon Prime, the presumption that people in Prime love the Amazon brand proper is not necessarily holding true. I think that, you know, some of the data would bear out that there's a little kryptonite in the Superman story around Amazon. Members of Prime are less of them are likely to love the Amazon brand than regular customers who just shop Amazon independent of Prime. And, you know, I think when that stat sort of jumped out at us, Scott and I kind of looked at each other like, that's interesting. You know, we saw some price adjustments to Prime, some other maybe symptoms that things are not necessarily smooth there and that there's some kinks to be worked out. And so I would say, you know, fast forward ourselves 5 years where Amazon's got a lot more competitors who are able to offer a lot more of what they offer to their customers. Those Prime customers are probably more susceptible to jump to another brand because they don't report to love the Amazon brand in particular to the degree that you would expect out of customers in a loyalty program.
So the first part of the two parts to this analytic approach suggests to us that for some brands, customers love the program more than the brand. In part two, we wanted to look at just members, only members enrolled in brands programs, and evaluate the extent to which those members love the program versus love the brand. A couple sort of macro study level stats to set the context and give us the first part of the answer to this story. About a quarter of members say, yep, I love the program. A slightly higher number, a little under a third, 29%, say, I love the brand. So probably more often than not, we would expect to find brands whose members love the brand more than the program. When we look at these things together,
disclaimer, the notion of brand love and brand loyalty is sort of the Facebook relationship status equivalent of complicated. There's a complexity here of these two things and the way they relate. And Scott and his team dreamt up sort of the love matrix and how it plays with loyalty. So we're going to walk you through, and we had the study kind of take a look at the relationship between these two things.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
But when we look at these things together, sort of on the vertical axis of this 2x2, love among members for the brand, sort of get a split versus high and low, and then we concurrently look at love for the program, again, still among members, high and low. A few interesting implications emerge. Now, the top right, program and brand love both high. Feels like program and brand are in sync. There are some brands for which the love of program is also equally low to love of brand. Our recommendation there to brands that would fall in that quadrant, consider retooling something about your program to help fix what's also broken about your brand. The interesting stories sort of live on the top left and bottom right. Brands that have high program or high brand love in the top left, but low program love. And then similarly down in the bottom right, brands that have low brand love, but its members love the program very highly. Before we get into revealing sort of a scatter plot of brands across the study, give us a sense. To what extent would you say your programs, and we'll do sort of a poll here, to what extent would you say your members love your program versus love your brand? Answer A, for example, if you feel that your members have high program love, high brand love, but high program love. And then you can see some of the other answers that we would serve up to represent the elements in the 2x2.
Yeah, so think about your program, think about the way that it kind of stacks up to your brand. How likely are you to show up in one of these quadrants? It's a good litmus test here.
Yeah. So we'll leave that poll open for a moment and share back the results in a couple minutes. In the meantime, we took all of the brands and programs that we evaluated in the study and mapped them across this 2x2. Many sort of grayed out dots live behind this 2x2, but here's a couple for instances, and here's how we might look at this 2x2. Take the competitors in retail grocery, Kroger and Safeway, for example. Kroger, a brand with members who have much higher love for the brand than, say, its counterpart Safeway, lower down and to the left, who is a brand with members that don't love the program as much as the Kroger program, don't love the brand as much as the Kroger program. So when competitors are evaluating where to open stores and which offers to serve up in market, Kroger stands to keep more of its customers because its members have high brand love than if Safeway launched a bigger, better offer campaign.
Totally. It takes me back to that location stat off the top of the webinar. Even if Safeway were to potentially open a store right next to the Kroger that I shop at, if I'm somebody who purports this level of brand love and a greater degree of love of the program, even side by side, I'm likely to lose in that particular example.
And there are lots of competitive pairings to look at, and here's just a couple other for instances. Maybe the American airline U.S. Airways was a pre-merger stat. We got a read from its members sort of before some of that was all unfolding. But take a look at AMC and Regal, for example. AMC, a brand with members that love the AMC brand and love the AMC program much more significantly than, say, Regal's program and Regal's brand.
You know, even on the American Airlines U.S. Airways sort of split, if I'm thinking now in that merger about how those programs live together, which elements of which program I'm going to keep, adopt, merge, or not, I think that there's some cues here likely for those brands.
We'll just throw up the answer to the poll on the questions to the last poll again here. A few others still not answering, no problem, but we've got a good sample of those of you who said your brands live in one of these quadrants. Not surprisingly, none of you would say low program love, low brand love, but an equal distribution of answers across the rest of those three quadrants. Here's sort of the strategic implications of how to move left to right, and more importantly, how to move from bottom to top. So the key question, how to move from an area where I have members eliciting low program or brand love to an area where members would say they have high brand love. A couple things we found for programs above that brand love line. We evaluated a number of sort of sentiments on the emotive side of loyalty and uncovered there's a lot of things that relate to high brand love. Things like feeling delighted. Sounds a lot like customer experience. Making customers feel special and recognized. Inspiring them through more positive program and brand experiences. Instilling a sense of comfort and maybe confidence. All of these things correlated very highly to customers that demonstrated high brand love for brands. So our point of view is that there's probably an opportunity for customer experience to play a stronger role inside what has traditionally been viewed as programmatic loyalty.
And probably the other way around, for loyalty program members to be the recipients of differentiated customer experiences that live up to, I think even Forrester would have some paraphrases for delighted, being
exactly.
recognized and expired. And I think these two things are linked. The same way that we know consumers don't distinguish between the message you put on a transit shelter, the one in the glowing rectangle in your living room, or the experience that they have in your store, they don't make that distinction either between their experience with your loyalty program and the rest of what goes on in your brand for them.
So the answer to the question, are members and customers loyal to the brand or just to the program? And the answer is, yep, both. And it depends. Here's what we hope you took away from this part of our conversation today. And for those brands that live in the bottom left quadrant of that love matrix, a program can't necessarily wholesale fix a broken brand, but certainly it's one approach to fixing some of the things or one of the things that might be broken about a brand. Secondly, there are brands for which members love the program more than the brand. So it's important for those brands to make sure that the program is doing a better job to transfer program equity, to transfer love of program to love of brand, because we feel that the brands that have established high brand love among customer bases will stand a better chance of fending off competitive threats. And then lastly, the coming together of customer experience with traditional loyalty. Brands that delight customers, make them feel special, feel valued, instill a sense of confidence and comfort, those brands will do a better job of creating brand love and fending off competitive threats. That's the conversation that we intended to have today. Just to sort of recap, tips of the waves in and around some of the highlights from a market view on the study, and a little bit more of a deep dive around topics like brand alignment and the great work that brand aligned programs can do for brands, and then answering the question, to what extent members are loyal to brands and to programs. So give us a visit on our website. There's certainly lots more detail to the conversations that we had today and other topics in the study. You're welcome, or we would invite you to download the white paper on our report. And if you're interested as well, give Sean and I a follow on Twitter, Scott J. Robinson1 and Sean Klassen on Twitter. So thanks very much for joining us today in between a couple World Cup soccer games. We have a few minutes for questions if there are any, and we'd be happy to take them.
Sure, yeah. So I think I saw one in the chat dialogue about, you know, what's on the horizon for loyalty programs. Lewis, thanks for the question. What does Loyalty 2.0 look like? I think there's probably a couple different ways to answer, and Scott and I spend a lot of time thinking about and operating the design of programs and the operation of programs under this premise. It's likely not going to look like it looked when your first competitor went into loyalty. It's likely going to weave its way through more areas of your business than you might have imagined it to be in the first place. And some of the necessary evils will remain. Scott and I joke around about the predictions for the coming year in loyalty. You know, Scotty, what is it you say about the discount sort of topic?
Yeah, that the market will, some brands in market will continue on the inertia that they are, and that discounts will be replaced by higher discounts.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an arms race to the bottom of profitability. There is a lot more that your brand can offer that has higher perceived value than that percent off, those particular coupons, et cetera, and not cost your brand anywhere near the same to deliver. It may require some operationalization in customer experience kind of realms, right down at retail level, et cetera, but those are probably the ones that are worth investing in, that can maintain over the long run, and the study would also bear out that it's other non-monetary things that allow your customers to bond with one another.
That's right. There is a role for discounts, and so our point of view isn't to say get rid of discounts, because there is a strong role for discounts to play. We would say consider discounts plus all of these other non-monetary means of influencing behavior that are more engaging, that are differentiating, and that give brands a potentially more cost-effective approach to engaging customers. So there is a role for discounts, but also to add non-monetary benefits.
And there's a bit more depth on that in the white paper, so please go and have a look at that, and Scott and I are happy to dive deeper on a topic like that anytime.
So with a couple minutes left, thanks everybody for your time this afternoon. Visit us online, follow us on Twitter, and a special shout out to our partners and friends at Loyalty 360 for hosting today's event.
Thanks everybody.